who had a greater effect on the course of American history. Cheney's family says he died due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. The Cheney family released a statement saying, in part, Dick Cheney was a great and good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country and to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness, and fly fishing. We are grateful beyond measure for all Dick Cheney did for our country, and we're blessed beyond measure to have loved and been loved by this noble giant of a man. CNN's Wolf Blitzer looks back at Dick Cheney's life and legacy.
Gradually, I realized that the person who was best qualified to be my vice presidential nominee was working by my side.
For most of his adult life, Richard Bruce Cheney was the ultimate Washington insider.
That I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
Named as George Bush's running mate in 2000, Dick Cheney quickly forged a public identity as a no-nonsense, disciplined gatekeeper, a powerful politician to whom and through whom access and influence flowed. But his appearance at the very highest levels of government was by no means his first time in the national spotlight. He began his public service career in the Nixon administration, working in several White House jobs dealing with the economy. After President Nixon resigned because of Watergate, Cheney worked for the new president, Gerald Ford, eventually becoming his chief of staff. When that 29-month presidency ended, Cheney returned to the land he loved, to his home in Wyoming. But it was a very short stay. Elected as the state's only member of the House of Representatives, Cheney returned to the Capitol and served for a decade in Congress. He was in the Republican leadership hierarchy when the first President Bush chose him to be his Secretary of Defense.
Faithfully discharge the duties of the office.
In charge of the Pentagon, Cheney was almost instantly engaged in two of the American military's largest and most complicated operations since the end of the Vietnam War. First, he led the removal of Panama's Manuel Noriega from power. And then, Operation Desert Storm, the American and Allied response after the invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein.
We have, in effect, destroyed most of the Iraqi army. We have taken out most of the infrastructure. The lights are out in Baghdad.
His experience and steadfastness were of critical importance, and those traits were not unnoticed. Out of government for the first time in years during the Clinton administration, Cheney became head of the giant oil services company Halliburton. It was a job that kept him steeped in defense and foreign policy, and a role that later became a lightning rod for his critics. By the time his old boss's son secured the Republican presidential nomination, Cheney's health was a major concern. 3 mild heart attacks and a quadruple bypass before he was 50. Doctors gave him a green light, but shortly after the 2000 election, he suffered another mild heart attack.
I've got a doctor that follows me around 24 hours a day that comes with a job as vice president.
Cheney quickly became a target for Bush administration critics, especially for convening oil and energy industry representatives to a White House meeting and then declining to make public any contents of the sessions. And later, after the terrorist attacks on 9/11, he became at times invisible to the public. Only a few people knew where he was for much of the time. But behind the scenes, Cheney was a driving force behind some of the biggest controversies of the Bush administration, including the second war against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. In 2007, I asked him about mistakes made and concerns among some Republicans that the war had damaged the Bush administration's credibility.
Wolf, I simply don't accept the premise of your question. I just think it's hogwash.
Cheney's health problems returned after he left office, for a time drastically altering his appearance. Another heart attack in 2010 prompted doctors to implant a battery-operated device to help his heart pump blood. His health seemed to stabilize after a 2012 heart transplant at the age of 71. Cheney largely disappeared from public life until emerging at the site of the January 6th insurrection 1 year after it happened. During a moment of silence on the House floor, Cheney accompanied his daughter, Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, also a member of the select committee that investigated the attack. He was warmly greeted by the House Speaker, Democrat Nancy Pelosi.
In our nation's 246-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump.
Later that